The morning sunlight glinted off the security barriers at Holloway Air Force Base as Senior Airman Maya Reynolds approached the checkpoint. Her dark curls were pulled back in a regulation bun, her dress blues pressed to perfection, and the weight of her duffel bag familiar against her shoulder as she joined the line of personnel waiting for ID verification. Everything was routine. The weather was clear, her transfer paperwork was complete, and she'd served 4 years without a single disciplinary incident. Today was supposed to be her first day at the elite Air Defense Intelligence Unit, the culmination of months of rigorous applications and security clearance evaluations. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. ID. The sharp voice cut through the morning air. She turned to see Technical Sergeant Derek Walsh sitting behind the security desk, his face set in that familiar rigid expression that meant business. Behind him, 3 other security personnel watched with barely concealed curiosity. Staff Sergeant Brian Donovan, Airman First Class James Harrison, and Airman First Class Daniel Kovacs, all men who'd been admitted to the base without additional scrutiny, despite having the same clearance level as hers. "Of course," Maya said, reaching for her ID wallet. She pulled out her military identification card and slid it across the counter, already sensing what was coming. There was something about the way Walsh's eyes narrowed as he examined her credentials. "This isn't sufficient," Walsh said, sliding the ID back. "I need to see additional verification." The words hit the checkpoint like a physical blow. Several personnel in line stopped their conversations, and the other security staff exchanged glances. On a military base, public security challenges were always noticed, but when they happened to a female officer who clearly belonged there, it became something else entirely. Maya didn't blink. She stood there, shoulders squared, lips pressed into a straight line. Her dark eyes remained fixed on the technical sergeant's face, searching for any hint of explanation or fairness. She found neither. "No explanation?" she asked, her voice perfectly, even despite the frustration building in her chest. Technical Sergeant Walsh crossed his arms, his jaw clenched tight enough that she could see the muscle twitching. "Additional security protocols. There's been a notification about your credentials." She tilted her head slightly, the way she did when processing complex intelligence reports during briefings. "After 4 years of service, 3 commendations for intelligence analysis, and a perfect security record?" The silence that followed was deafening. The only sounds were the distant hum of aircraft engines being tested on the far side of the base, and the soft whisper of wind across the concrete barriers. Then came the muttered word from behind her back. "Special treatment." She didn't turn around, but she heard it clearly. She always heard it. The suggestion that her presence had nothing to do with skill and everything to do with filling quotas. The implication that women in intelligence weren't there because of their abilities, but because of some misguided attempt at diversity. Maya walked away from the checkpoint in silence, her polished shoes clicking against the concrete with military precision. The engines of nearby aircraft continued their mechanical rumbling, and the sun was beginning to climb higher in the sky, painting everything in shades of gold that reminded her of the Nevada desert, where her grandmother had once worked on classified projects that would never be declassified. But as she stepped away from the group, something shifted. The collar of her dress blues had loosened during the early morning flight, and as she moved, it shifted slightly to the left, just enough for something to become visible on her upper chest. A small, distinct symbol in navy blue ink. A compass rose surrounded by concentric circles, partially hidden, but unmistakable to anyone who knew what to look for. Technical Sergeant Walsh's eyes caught the glimpse of ink, and his entire demeanor changed. His eyes widened, and he stepped forward slowly, like a man who'd just seen a ghost. "Airman." His voice was different now, urgent, almost breathless. "Where did you get that tattoo?" Maya paused mid-step, then slowly turned around. The other security personnel had stopped pretending not to watch. Even the personnel in line had gone quiet. "Why?" she asked, simply. Walsh stepped closer, and the whole checkpoint seemed to freeze. The morning breeze had died down, leaving an almost supernatural stillness in the air. "Because I haven't seen that insignia in 17 years, he said, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. and the last person I knew who wore it saved hundreds of lives during Operation Northern Watch." The words hung in the desert air like heat shimmer. Technical Sergeant Walsh's face had gone pale beneath his tan, and his hands were trembling slightly. Something Maya had never seen from a man who'd earned his reputation as one of the toughest security officers on the base. "Northern Watch," he repeated, more to himself than to anyone else. His eyes were fixed on the small portion of her tattoo that was visible, as if he were trying to decode a message written in a language he'd almost forgotten. The other security personnel shifted uncomfortably. Staff Sergeant Donovan cleared his throat, but a single look from Walsh silenced him before he could speak. This wasn't about them anymore. This was about something bigger, something that predated their arrival at Holloway by years. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "Tell me about Northern Watch, sir," Maya said quietly. Walsh closed his eyes for a moment, and when he opened them, he was somewhere else entirely, somewhere cold and dangerous, where the smell of jet fuel mixed with tension and fear. "December 16th, 2008, he began, his voice taking on the distant quality of someone reliving a nightmare. "I was a young airman then, assigned to a forward security post near the Turkish border. Intelligence had been reporting unusual activity, but command was skeptical about the reliability of the sources." He paused, looking around at the other personnel who were listening with rapt attention. Even the people in line had stopped checking their watches, drawn in by the gravity in the technical sergeant's voice. "We were hit at 0300, not a direct military attack, but something worse. A coordinated terrorist strike targeting the civilian population center near our base. 3 simultaneous vehicle-borne IEDs followed by small arms fire from multiple directions. I was on perimeter duty when the first explosion shook the entire compound." Maya could picture it, the chaos, the smoke, the desperate radio calls for support that might never come. She'd heard similar stories from other veterans, but there was something different about the way Walsh was telling this one. Something personal. Command was in disarray. No one knew if we were the primary target or just a diversion for something bigger. Communications were scrambled, and we had reports of hostiles moving toward the refugee camp 2 clicks from our position. Walsh's hand unconsciously moved to his right shoulder, where Maya now noticed a slight stiffness in his movements that she'd never paid attention to before. We had no intel, no eyes in the sky, no way of knowing where the threats were coming from, or where they'd hit next. The entire security apparatus was blind, and I was looking at the possibility of hundreds of civilian casualties. A small, grim smile played at the corner of his mouth. Then she appeared. "Who appeared?" Staff Sergeant Donovan asked, forgetting military courtesy in his fascination. "A woman I'd never seen before. She wasn't wearing standard uniform. Just black tactical gear with no identifying markers, except for a single patch on her shoulder. The compass rose in concentric circles." Walsh pointed at Maya's chest. "That symbol." She walked into the command center like she owned it, put a flash drive into the main terminal, and suddenly we had everything. Enemy positions, movement patterns, communications intercepts, the entire network mapped out in real time. The checkpoint was completely silent now, except for the distant hum of the base's generators. She never identified herself, never explained how she got the intelligence or why she was there, just gave us exactly what we needed at exactly the right moment, then disappeared. When the dust settled, we'd prevented 3 more attacks, captured 17 hostiles, and saved God knows how many lives. Walsh stepped closer to Maya, his eyes searching hers. I asked around afterward, tried to find out who she was, but nobody had any record of an intelligence specialist matching her description being assigned to our sector at that time. Colonel Walsh stepped even closer to Maya, his eyes intense. It was like she was a ghost. But that symbol, I drew it in my notebook that night. I've been carrying that sketch for 17 years, trying to figure out what unit used that insignia. The weight of the moment settled over everyone present. This wasn't just about ID verification anymore. This was about legacy, about debts that couldn't be repaid, and about secrets that ran deeper than anyone had imagined. "Your grandmother," Walsh said, though it wasn't really a question. Maya nodded slowly, her hand unconsciously moving to cover the tattoo that had changed everything in the span of 5 minutes. The revelation hung between them like a live wire. Technical Sergeant Walsh stared at Maya with a mixture of awe and something that looked almost like guilt. The other security personnel remained frozen in place, sensing they were witnessing something that would be talked about in hushed tones for years to come. "Call sign, Oracle," Maya said quietly, her voice carrying across the checkpoint with unusual clarity. "Captain Eleanor Reynolds, 24th Intelligence Squadron, Special Reconnaissance." The name hit Technical Sergeant Walsh like a physical blow. His eyes widened, and he took an involuntary step backward. "Jesus Christ," he breathed. "Oracle, was your grandmother?" The other security personnel exchanged confused glances. Staff Sergeant Donovan cleared his throat tentatively. "Sir, I'm not familiar with—" "You wouldn't be," Walsh cut him off sharply. "Oracle ran intelligence operations you'll never read about in any official report. Operations that officially never happened, in places we were never supposed to be, for reasons that are still classified above your pay grade." He turned back to Maya, his expression softening in a way none of his subordinates had ever seen before. She was a legend. There are stories, operations in Kosovo, Afghanistan, Iraq, and half a dozen other places that don't exist on any map. They say she could predict enemy movements before the enemy themselves knew what they were going to do. That she could extract intelligence from noise that nobody else could even detect. "The tattoo was passed to me the day I graduated from intelligence school," Maya said, her hand still resting protectively over the ink on her chest. "It's not just decoration, Sergeant. It's a promise. A commitment to uphold what she stood for." "And what was that?" Airman First Class Harrison asked. Genuine curiosity overcoming his usual stoic demeanor, Maya looked at each of them in turn. These men who had questioned her credentials, who had whispered special treatment behind her back for months, these security officers who had routinely waved through male personnel while scrutinizing women with identical clearances. Excellence without compromise. Intelligence without prejudice. Protection of those who cannot protect themselves. Her voice grew stronger with each word. "My grandmother saved lives that will never be counted in any official record. She prevented disasters the world will never know about. And she did it all while people like you questioned whether she belonged in the room." The accusation hit its targets like shrapnel. Donovan shifted uncomfortably, and Harrison's face flushed red. Only Airman First Class Kovacs had the grace to look genuinely ashamed. "They recognized it," Maya continued, her dark eyes now fixed on Technical Sergeant Walsh. "When I applied for the Air Defense Intelligence Unit, when my transfer came up for approval, they recognized the name Reynolds. They knew exactly who my grandmother was and what she'd accomplished." "Then why?" Walsh began, but Maya cut him off. "They didn't want another Reynolds in intelligence, Sergeant. My grandmother scared people. She operated outside normal channels, took risks that made commanders nervous, achieved results that made other analysts look ordinary by comparison." A small, fierce smile played at her lips. "I intend to do the same." The silence that followed was different from before. It wasn't the uncomfortable quiet of witnessed confrontation or the respectful hush of a war story. This was the pause that comes when everyone realizes the game has fundamentally changed. For the first time since he'd begun this conversation, Technical Sergeant Walsh looked past Maya's uniform, past the layers of military protocol and gender politics that had clouded his judgment. He saw something he should have noticed months ago. The steady gaze that never wavered during confrontation. The analytical intelligence that had helped her rise through the ranks faster than her peers. The calm focus that remained unshaken even under the most stressful circumstances. He saw the fire that burned behind those dark eyes. The same fire that had saved his life and countless others in a forward operating base in Turkey 17 years ago. "Your aptitude scores," he said suddenly. "Your security clearance evaluations, your analytical assessments, they're not just good, are they?" "Top 2% in every category," she replied simply. "But you already knew that." Walsh nodded slowly, pieces of a puzzle finally clicking into place. The delayed transfer approvals, the additional background checks, the constant extra verification that none of the male intelligence specialists had been subjected to. It all made sense now. Command hadn't been protecting the intelligence unit from an unqualified analyst. They'd been protecting their own comfort zone from someone who might prove too exceptional to ignore. They were afraid, he said, more to himself than to anyone else. Yes, sir. They were afraid that if they let me into that unit, I might actually be as good as my grandmother was. And that would raise uncomfortable questions about a lot of other qualified women who've been passed over for the wrong reasons. Technical Sergeant Walsh looked around at his security team, seeing them with new eyes. Donovan, who needed extra training to pass his security certification. Harrison, who'd never scored above average on threat assessments. Kovacs, who was solid, but unremarkable in every measurable way. All of them had been fast-tracked for base security positions, while Maya, who outperformed them in every category, had been subjected to additional scrutiny at every turn. The injustice of it hit him like a hammer blow. The desert wind picked up again, stirring small dust devils across the concrete as Technical Sergeant Walsh faced the most important decision of his career. Around him, the other security personnel waited with expressions ranging from curiosity to barely concealed dread. They were beginning to understand that their comfortable assumptions about merit and qualification were about to be shattered. "Airman First Class Harrison," Walsh said suddenly, his voice carrying the sharp edge of command authority. "What was your final score on the threat identification simulator?" Harrison straightened, confused by the question. 83%, sir." Staff Sergeant Donovan, 86%, sir." "Airman First Class Kovacs?" Kovacs' face had gone pale. 79%, sir." Walsh nodded grimly, then turned to Maya. "Senior Airman Reynolds, remind me of your threat identification scores." 98% average across all threat categories, sir. 99% on the advanced counterintelligence simulations. The numbers hung in the air like an indictment. Donovan and Harrison exchanged uncomfortable glances, finally understanding the magnitude of what had been happening. They'd been fast-tracked for security positions, while someone who outperformed them by double digits had been deemed requiring additional verification. "And your cryptographic scores?" Walsh continued, his voice growing colder with each question. "Perfect score on all encryption tests, sir. 0 critical errors in over 300 hours of pattern analysis. Intelligence classification evaluations?" "Highest possible rating, sir." "I've never had a single intelligence breach or security violation." Technical Sergeant Walsh turned to face the other security personnel, his expression harder than any of them had seen in months of service under his command. "Gentlemen, I need you to explain something to me. How exactly did you justify to yourselves that you deserve expedited security clearance while Senior Airman Reynolds was held back for a, quote, additional verification?" The question was like a slap. Staff Sergeant Donovan opened his mouth to respond, then closed it again when he realized there was no answer that wouldn't make him sound like a fool. Or worse. "Sir," Airman First Class Harrison finally said, his voice small, we were told she needed more background checks. We assumed there were factors we weren't aware of." "What factors?" Walsh's voice was deadly quiet now. "Her gender? Her heritage? The fact that her grandmother's reputation made people nervous?" "Sergeant," Maya interjected softly, "it's not their fault. They were just following orders, same as everyone else." But Walsh wasn't interested in mercy at the moment. 17 years of guilt over the debt he owed to a ghost operative, combined with the growing realization that he'd been complicit in perpetuating the same kind of discrimination that had limited operatives like Oracle, had crystallized into something that demanded immediate action. "No, Airman, it is their fault. And it's my fault. And it's the fault of every person in the chain of command who looked at your scores, looked at your record, and decided that politics mattered more than national security." He pulled out his phone and speed-dialed a number. The other security personnel watched in growing alarm as he waited for someone to answer. "Colonel Mercer? This is Technical Sergeant Walsh at Holloway Main Checkpoint." "Yes, sir. I'm calling about Senior Airman Reynolds' transfer to the Air Defense Intelligence Unit." Walsh's voice was firm, unyielding. "No, sir, I'm not calling to request approval. I'm calling to inform you that she's been cleared for immediate access, effective immediately." Even from several feet away, they could hear the colonel's voice rising on the other end of the line. "With all due respect, sir," Walsh continued, his voice cutting through the shouting, "I've just learned that Senior Airman Reynolds is the granddaughter of Captain Eleanor Reynolds, call sign Oracle, 24th Intelligence Squadron. The same intelligence operative who saved my life and the lives of hundreds of others in Turkey in 2008. The shouting on the phone stopped abruptly. Yes, sir. That Oracle. Walsh stood straighter, his resolve evident in every line of his body. Sir, if you want to explain to the Pentagon why we've been holding back the granddaughter of one of the most decorated intelligence specialists in Air Force history because of bureaucratic politics, that's your prerogative. But I will not have it said that my security checkpoint failed to recognize exceptional talent when it was staring us in the face. There was a long pause as the colonel spoke more quietly. Yes, sir, I understand the implications. No, sir, I'm not concerned about setting precedents. I'm concerned about being able to look at myself in the mirror. Thank you, sir. Yes, sir, I'll file the paperwork immediately. He ended the call and looked at Maya, who had remained perfectly still throughout the entire conversation. Senior Airman Reynolds, you are cleared to proceed to the Air Defense Intelligence Unit immediately. Your security credentials have been verified at the highest level. Sir, That's not a request, Airman. That's an order. He turned to the other security personnel. As for the rest of you, I suggest you use today to reflect on what you've learned about assumptions and merit. Because starting tomorrow, Senior Airman Reynolds is going to show you what real intelligence analysis looks like. As if summoned by his words, the morning sun broke through a bank of clouds, casting everything in golden light that made the tattoo on Maya's chest seem to glow like a beacon. The next morning found Maya already awake, staring at the ceiling of her temporary quarters. She'd spent most of the night thinking about her grandmother, not the legendary oracle of military folklore, but Eleanor Reynolds, the woman who had taught her to solve puzzles when she was 6 years old, who had trained her to notice patterns that others missed. Maya, her grandmother had said during one of their last conversations before the cancer took her, intelligence isn't about what you know, it's about what you see when others are blind. It's about finding the signal in the noise when everyone else hears only static. Everything else is just politics. Now, pulling on her uniform in the pre-dawn darkness, Maya could almost hear her grandmother's voice mixing with the distant sound of aircraft warming up on the flight line. The secure briefing room was unusually crowded for an early morning intelligence session. Word had apparently spread through the base overnight, and several off-duty analysts had found excuses to attend the initial briefing. Staff Sergeant Donovan and Airman First Class Harrison sat in the front row, their expressions carefully neutral. Even some of the administrative personnel had gathered near the back, ostensibly to deliver paperwork, but obviously curious to see what would happen. Major Caroline Bennett entered precisely at 0700, carrying a tablet and wearing the kind of focused expression that meant this wasn't going to be a routine briefing. Good morning, everyone, she said, her voice carrying clearly through the room. Today we're going to be analyzing surveillance data from Sector 12 Delta, with particular attention to communications patterns indicating possible hostile cyber activity. Intelligence suggests potential infiltration attempts against our defense networks in the region. She activated the large display screen, showing a detailed topographical map overlaid with signal intercept data points. The visualization was complex, patterns of digital traffic flowing across borders like rivers of light. Senior Airman Reynolds will be leading the pattern analysis team today. For those who don't know her, she's our newest transfer, specializing in predictive threat modeling and signals intelligence. Major Bennett nodded toward Maya, who sat quietly at the analysis station already studying the data flows with the intensity her grandmother had taught her. The digital traffic patterns around the border region were known trouble spots, networks of proxy servers and anonymized connections that provided perfect cover for state-sponsored hacking attempts. It was exactly the kind of challenge where intuitive pattern recognition and precise analytical thinking could mean the difference between detecting a threat early or discovering a breach after the damage was done. Questions? Major Bennett asked. Airman Second Class Peter Walters raised his hand. The young man was notorious for his skepticism about new personnel. Ma'am, wouldn't it be prudent to have a more experienced analyst lead this particular operation? This sector has been problematic before. The room went dead silent. Every person there understood the subtext of the question, and every person there was watching to see how both the Major and Maya would respond. Major Bennett's expression didn't change, but something cold and dangerous flickered behind her eyes. Airman Walters, are you questioning my operational judgment? No, ma'am, I just... Because if you are questioning my operational judgment, I'd be happy to explain my reasoning. Senior Airman Reynolds has logged more hours on signal pattern analysis than any analyst currently stationed at Holloway. Her predictive modeling scores are the highest I've seen in 12 years of intelligence work, and her ability to identify anomalous traffic in complex network environments is frankly exceptional. She paused, letting the words sink in. But more importantly, Airman Walters, this is not a democracy. When I choose an analysis lead, I choose based on capability, not on your comfort level with military tradition. Walters' face flushed red, but he nodded and looked down at his console. Any other questions? Major Bennett asked, her gaze sweeping the room. No? Outstanding. Senior Airman Reynolds, let's get to work. The next 2 hours were unlike any intelligence operation the Holloway analysts had ever witnessed. Where most would methodically work through the data sector by sector, Maya approached the intelligence challenge like a chess grandmaster, seeing patterns that weren't obvious to others, making connections between seemingly unrelated data points that revealed a hidden structure beneath the noise. There, she said after 90 minutes of intense analysis, pointing to a cluster of signals that appeared unremarkable to everyone else in the room. That's not normal traffic. Staff Sergeant Donovan leaned closer, squinting at the display. It looks like standard encrypted communications to me. Commercial VPN. Probably civilian traffic. Maya shook her head, her eyes never leaving the screen. The timing is wrong. The packets are perfectly spaced at 12. 7-second intervals. No human browsing behavior creates that kind of regularity. She expanded the visualization, revealing dozens of similar patterns throughout the sector. Tiny threads of suspiciously perfect data flows, hidden within the chaotic web of normal internet traffic. It's a command and control network, she said quietly, disguised as regular traffic, but it's actually coordinating something much larger. Major Bennett moved to stand behind her chair, studying the patterns Maya had identified. How many nodes? At least 73 so far, ma'am, and they're all communicating with this server cluster here. Maya highlighted a digital infrastructure hub just across the border. I believe this is a preparation for a coordinated attack on multiple networks simultaneously. The revelation sent a ripple of tension through the briefing room. If Maya was right, they were witnessing the early stages of what could become one of the largest cyber attacks in recent history. An invisible army assembling in the digital shadows, preparing to strike. Time frame? Major Bennett asked. Maya's fingers flew across the keyboard, extracting data that most analysts wouldn't even know how to look for. Based on the escalation pattern of command signals, I'd estimate less than 6 hours, ma'am. The Major straightened, her expression grave. That doesn't give us much time to prepare countermeasures or alert potential targets. Permission to implement Oracle protocol, ma'am? Maya asked, never taking her eyes off the screen. The room went silent. Oracle protocol wasn't in any official Air Force cybersecurity playbook. It wasn't taught in any training course or documented in any manual. Oracle protocol? Major Bennett repeated, her voice careful and measured. I'm not familiar with that procedure, Airman. Maya turned to face her superior officer for the first time since the briefing began. It's a predictive countermeasure strategy developed by my grandmother, ma'am. It wasn't officially adopted because it was considered too unconventional. Unconventional how? The Major asked. But there was something in her tone that suggested she already knew part of the answer. It doesn't just defend our networks, ma'am. It predicts the attacker's next 5 moves and sets traps accordingly. It doesn't just stop the attack. It redirects it back against the source, while simultaneously collecting intelligence on their methods and infrastructure. The implications were immediately clear to everyone in the room. This wasn't a standard defensive protocol. This was offensive cybersecurity, preventative, aggressive, and legally complicated. Major Bennett studied Maya's face for a long moment, weighing the risks against the potential benefits. This protocol, it's never been officially sanctioned? No, ma'am. My grandmother developed it during her final years with the 24th. It was deemed too aggressive for standard implementation. And you know how to execute it? Maya nodded once, her confidence absolute. She taught me everything about it before she died, ma'am. Every parameter, every contingency. The Major's gaze swept around the room, taking in the other analysts who were watching the exchange with expressions ranging from skepticism to fascination. This was a career-defining moment. Authorizing an unsanctioned protocol could end her military career if it went wrong, but failing to stop a major cyber attack would be equally disastrous. "You're certain about the attack window? 6 hours?" "At most, ma'am. The command signals are accelerating." Major Bennett straightened. Decision made. "Execute Oracle Protocol, Airman Reynolds. Full documentation of every step. I'll take responsibility for the authorization." For the next 4 hours, the Intelligence Center at Holloway Air Force Base witnessed something none of them had seen before. Maya worked with a speed and precision that seemed almost superhuman, her fingers dancing across multiple keyboards, her eyes constantly scanning data streams that would have overwhelmed most analysts. The Oracle Protocol wasn't just a defensive measure. It was digital combat at its most sophisticated. As the hostile network began its initial probing attacks, Maya's countermeasures were already 3 steps ahead, creating false vulnerabilities that looked tempting to the attackers, while simultaneously tracing back through their command structure to identify the source. "They're starting to realize something's wrong," Airman First Class Harrison observed, watching as the attack patterns became more erratic. "They're changing tactics." Maya nodded without looking up. "That's part of the protocol. Make them think they're being clever by adjusting, while actually channeling them exactly where we want them to go." 2 hours into the operation, she had mapped the entire hostile network, identified the command nodes, and was systematically turning their own infrastructure against them. "There," she said suddenly, highlighting a complex data structure on her main screen. "That's their actual target list. 17 critical infrastructure systems, including 3 power grids, 4 major banking networks, and multiple military communication channels." Major Bennett leaned closer, her expression grim. "This isn't just a cyber attack. This is preparation for something much bigger." "Yes, ma'am," Maya agreed. "The digital equivalent of cutting communications before a physical attack. Classic military doctrine, just executed in cyberspace." "Can you identify the actors behind it?" Maya's expression changed, becoming more focused, almost predatory. "Already working on it, ma'am. Oracle Protocol doesn't just stop attacks, it hunts the attackers." For the next hour, the briefing room was so quiet, you could hear the soft whirring of the computer cooling fans. Everyone watched as Maya Reynolds systematically unraveled a hostile network that had taken months to build, following digital breadcrumbs back to their source, with the kind of intuitive precision that couldn't be taught in any intelligence school. "Got them," she said finally, her voice calm but with an undercurrent of satisfaction. "The primary command node is operating from a server farm outside Novosibirsk, but they're using a sophisticated proxy network to make it appear like the attacks are coming from multiple other nations." She displayed a complex diagram showing the actual attack infrastructure versus the false trails the hostile actors had created to confuse attribution. "Without Oracle Protocol, we would have been following digital ghosts for weeks while they covered their tracks. Standard countermeasures would have stopped maybe 40% of the attack vectors, leaving them plenty of openings to achieve their objectives." Major Bennett studied the visualization, her expression a mixture of amazement and professional appreciation. "And now?" "Their entire command and control structure has been compromised. We've collected comprehensive intelligence on their methods, targets, and infrastructure, and they have no idea we've done it. They think their attacks simply encountered unexpectedly strong defenses and failed." The significance of what they'd just witnessed settled over the room like a physical presence. This wasn't just threat prevention. This was counterintelligence at a level most of them had only read about in classified reports. Major Bennett straightened. Decision made. "Airman Reynolds, prepare a full briefing package on this operation. I'm taking this directly to Colonel Mercer. The Pentagon needs to know what we're dealing with." As Maya compiled the data, she became aware of the looks she was receiving from the other analysts in the room. Where before there had been skepticism or thinly veiled condescension, now there was something else. Respect, certainly, but also a kind of wary reassessment, as if they were seeing her properly for the first time. Staff Sergeant Donovan approached her workstation as she was finalizing the report. "Reynolds?" he said quietly, his voice pitched so only she could hear. "What you just did. I've never seen anything like it." "Thank you, Sergeant," she replied, still focused on her screens. No, I mean it. I've been in intelligence for 7 years. I've worked with some of the best analysts in the Air Force. Nobody processes data the way you just did. Nobody thinks that many moves ahead. She looked up at him then, and something in her expression made him take a small step back. There was a calm certainty in her eyes, the kind that came from absolute confidence in one's abilities. My grandmother used to say that good intelligence isn't about seeing what's there, Sergeant. It's about seeing what's going to be there before anyone else realizes it's possible. Donovan nodded slowly, beginning to understand something fundamental about the woman he and his colleagues had so quickly dismissed. Your grandmother, Oracle. She taught you this? This wasn't in any training program I've ever heard of. Some skills can't be taught in a classroom, Sergeant. Some perspectives can't be reduced to a training manual. Maya turned back to her screens, making final adjustments to the report. Intelligence work isn't just about following procedures. It's about seeing patterns where others see only chaos. Before Donovan could respond, the briefing room door opened and Colonel Richard Mercer strode in, followed by Technical Sergeant Walsh. The entire room snapped to attention. At ease, the colonel said, his gaze immediately finding Maya at her workstation. Senior Airman Reynolds, I understand you've just prevented what could have been the most significant cyber attack on U.S. infrastructure this year. Just doing my job, sir, Maya replied, standing straight. Colonel Mercer's mouth twitched in what might have been the ghost of a smile. Major Bennett tells me you implemented something called Oracle Protocol. Care to explain what that is and why it's not in any of our official security playbooks? Maya met his gaze steadily. Oracle Protocol is a predictive counterintelligence methodology developed by my grandmother, Captain Eleanor Reynolds, during her final years with the 24th Intelligence Squadron, sir. It was deemed too aggressive for standard implementation at the time. Too aggressive, the colonel repeated, studying her face. And yet you just used it to not only prevent a major attack, but to collect actionable intelligence on the perpetrators while maintaining our plausible deniability. Yes, sir. Colonel Mercer glanced at Technical Sergeant Walsh, who was watching the exchange with an expression that mingled pride with something that looked almost like vindication. Sergeant Walsh here tells me you had some difficulty accessing the base this morning. Something about, quote, additional verification being required for your credentials. There was a brief delay at the security checkpoint, sir. It's been resolved. The colonel's eyes narrowed slightly. Yes, I imagine it has. He turned to address the entire room. What Senior Airman Reynolds has accomplished today is exactly why we cannot afford to let bureaucracy and outdated thinking get in the way of talent. The threats we face don't care about rank or time in service. They care about results. He returned his attention to Maya. The Pentagon is very interested in this Oracle protocol of yours, Airman. General Williams at Cyber Command wants a full briefing, and there's talk of implementing it across multiple intelligence divisions. Maya's composure slipped for just a moment, surprise flashing across her features before she regained control. Sir, the protocol requires a certain intuitive approach that might be difficult to standardize. So I gathered, the colonel said dryly. Which is why they don't just want the protocol, they want you to train a select team to implement it. The implications of this statement rippled through the briefing room. This wasn't just professional recognition. This was the kind of career opportunity that most intelligence specialists could only dream about. Of course, there's the matter of your security clearance, Colonel Mercer continued, his tone deliberately casual. The kind of work we're talking about would require TS/SCI with special access caveats. Normally, that would take months of additional background checks and evaluations. Maya said nothing, waiting for the other shoe to drop. However, the colonel reached into his jacket and pulled out a folder bearing the highest security classifications. It seems that someone at the Pentagon remembered your grandmother quite well. Your upgraded clearance came through about 30 minutes ago with a note that simply said, long overdue. He handed her the folder, which contained her new security credentials. Effective immediately, you're being promoted to Staff Sergeant and reassigned as lead analyst for a new division within cyber intelligence. The assignment comes directly from General Williams. The room erupted in a flurry of whispered conversations. A direct appointment from a general was almost unheard of for someone of Maya's rank and time in service. But more than that, the speed with which everything was happening suggested powerful forces had been set in motion by the simple revelation of who her grandmother had been. "Sir," Maya began, but Colonel Mercer raised a hand to stop her. "Before you say anything, Reynolds, you should know that I served with your grandmother in Kosovo in 2002. I was a young lieutenant then, assigned to a forward intelligence post that was supposed to be monitoring separatist communications." A distant look came into his eyes. "We intercepted fragments of what we thought was a planned attack on a civilian target, but the intelligence was incomplete. Your grandmother was brought in as a consultant." He shook his head slowly, the memory clearly still vivid after all these years. "In 3 hours, she did what our entire team couldn't accomplish in 3 weeks. She didn't just identify the target, she mapped the entire network, predicted their next 4 operations, and set in motion a counterintelligence operation that ultimately led to the dismantling of a terrorist cell responsible for hundreds of deaths." Colonel Mercer looked directly at Maya, his expression somber. "When I heard your name cross my desk for transfer approval, I should have made the connection. I should have remembered what Eleanor Reynolds meant to this service. Instead, I let the bureaucracy handle it the way it always does, with caution, delay, and unnecessary scrutiny." The admission hung in the air, a public acknowledgement of failure from a senior officer that was as rare as it was powerful. "That was my mistake," he continued. "One I won't repeat, and one I've instructed every officer under my command to learn from." He turned to address the entire room once more. "The Air Force doesn't have the luxury of overlooking talent like Reynolds because it doesn't fit our preconceptions of what an intelligence specialist should look like or where they should come from. The threats we face are evolving too quickly, and the stakes are too high." Colonel Mercer returned his attention to Maya. "Staff Sergeant Reynolds, report to Secure Briefing Room Alpha at 0800 tomorrow. General Williams will be video conferencing in to discuss the implementation of Oracle protocol across our cyber defense networks." "Yes, sir," Maya replied, still processing the rapid turn of events. As Colonel Mercer turned to leave, he paused beside Technical Sergeant Walsh. "Good call, Sergeant," he said quietly, but loud enough for those nearby to hear. "Sometimes it takes a security officer with the courage to question the system to remind the rest of us what we're supposed to stand for." After the colonel left, the briefing room erupted in activity. Analysts who had barely acknowledged Maya's existence that morning were now approaching her workstation, asking questions about her methodology, her approach to pattern recognition, the intuitive leaps that had allowed her to see connections that had eluded everyone else. Through it all, Maya maintained the calm focus that had been her grandmother's hallmark, answering questions precisely, explaining concepts clearly, but never revealing all the secrets that made Oracle protocol so effective. Some things, as Eleanor had taught her, had to be felt rather than explained, sensed rather than documented. As the day's operations wound down, Maya found herself alone at her workstation, making final adjustments to the report that would go to Cyber Command. She became aware of a presence behind her and turned to find Technical Sergeant Walsh standing there, his expression thoughtful. "You knew, didn't you?" he asked quietly. "When you arrived at the checkpoint this morning, you knew exactly who your grandmother was to me. To all of us who served during that period." Maya considered the question carefully before answering. "I knew she had saved lives at Holloway, yes. I knew her work had touched many careers. But I didn't know you were there that day in Turkey until you told me." Walsh nodded slowly, accepting this. "Why didn't you just tell me immediately? It would have saved a lot of trouble." "My grandmother believed that respect should be earned, not inherited," Maya replied, her voice soft but firm. "She didn't want me trading on her name or her reputation. She wanted me to stand on my own abilities. Even if that meant facing discrimination and delays that you didn't deserve? Especially then." Maya's expression grew more intense. "She faced worse, Sergeant. Much worse. In her day, women weren't just overlooked in intelligence work. They were actively pushed out, their contributions minimized, their insights dismissed. She fought that system not by demanding recognition, but by being so extraordinarily good at what she did that they couldn't ignore her." Walsh considered this, understanding, dawning in his eyes. "So when you let me see the tattoo—" "It wasn't an accident," Maya acknowledged. "But it wasn't about getting special treatment either. It was about making you see the bigger picture, about the talent the Air Force might be overlooking because of outdated thinking and unconscious bias." "Well," Walsh said with a small smile, "mission accomplished, Staff Sergeant Reynolds." "Mission very much accomplished." As he turned to leave, Maya called after him, "Sergeant Walsh?" He paused, looking back. "Thank you. For remembering her, for telling her story. There aren't many people left who know what she really did for this country." "I'll never forget," Walsh said simply. "And after today, I don't think anyone at Holloway ever will, either." The setting sun cast long shadows across the intelligence center as Maya finally completed her report. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Explaining Oracle protocol to General Williams, training a team to implement her grandmother's methodology, proving that her success today wasn't a fluke, but the result of years of preparation and inherited wisdom. But for now, as she looked around at the space that would become her professional home, she felt a sense of quiet satisfaction. Eleanor Reynolds had blazed this trail decades earlier, fighting battles that Maya would never have to face because of her grandmother's courage and determination. The compass rose tattoo on her chest seemed to warm slightly, as if acknowledging that the legacy it represented was alive and well, guiding a new generation through the complex digital battlefields of a world her grandmother had only begun to imagine. The secure briefing room Alpha was nothing like the standard intelligence centers on base. Unlike the open floor plans with multiple workstations that characterized most analysis spaces, this room was designed for the most sensitive operations the Air Force conducted. The walls were lined with advanced signal dampening technology, the windows were polarized to prevent any visual surveillance, and every person who entered underwent biometric verification that went far beyond standard security measures. Maya arrived 20 minutes early, determined to be fully prepared before General Williams connected. She had spent most of the night refining her presentation on Oracle protocol, distilling her grandmother's complex methodology into something that could be understood by senior leadership without sacrificing the nuance that made it effective. Technical Sergeant Walsh met her at the security checkpoint, his demeanor now respectful without being deferential. "Good morning, Staff Sergeant Reynolds. They're almost ready for you inside." "Thank you, Sergeant." Maya noticed that the other security personnel were watching their interaction with poorly concealed interest. Word had clearly spread throughout the base about yesterday's events. Walsh lowered his voice. "Just so you know, there are some heavy hitters in there already. 2 colonels from Pentagon Intelligence, someone from the NSA whose credentials I'm not allowed to verify, and a civilian consultant who arrived in an unmarked helicopter at 0500. Maya nodded, absorbing this information. The level of attendance suggested this briefing was far more significant than she had initially anticipated. "Any advice?" Walsh considered this for a moment. "Be direct. These people don't appreciate sugarcoating or false modesty. They're here because what you did yesterday scared the hell out of a lot of people who thought our cyber defenses were impenetrable." "Understood." As she turned to enter the briefing room, Walsh added, "And Reynolds, your grandmother would be proud as hell right now." The sentiment stayed with her as she walked into the secure space and found herself facing a room full of the most senior intelligence officials she had ever encountered. Colonel Mercer was there, along with 2 full-bird colonels wearing Pentagon insignia. A stern-looking woman in civilian clothes sat beside them, her posture and alert eyes screaming, "Intelligence professional!" despite the absence of a uniform. Most surprising was the elderly man seated at the far end of the table. He must have been in his late 70s, with steel gray hair and the kind of weathered face that spoke of decades spent in difficult places. He wore no uniform or identifying credentials, yet everyone in the room, including the colonels, seemed to defer to him subtly in their body language. "Staff Sergeant Reynolds," Colonel Mercer said formally, "thank you for joining us. We're waiting for General Williams to connect, and then we'll begin the briefing." Maya took her position at the presentation station, connecting her secure tablet to the room's display system. As she made her final preparations, she felt the elderly man's eyes on her, studying her with an intensity that was almost palpable. The large screen at the front of the room flickered to life, revealing the stern face of General Abigail Williams, the commanding officer of the Air Force Cyber Command. Despite her remote presence, the general's authority filled the room immediately. "Let's get started," General Williams said without preamble. "I understand we have Staff Sergeant Reynolds here to brief us on this Oracle protocol that managed to neutralize what my analysts are calling the most sophisticated cyber attack attempt they've seen in 5 years. "That's correct, General," Colonel Mercer replied. "Staff Sergeant Reynolds implemented the protocol yesterday in response to detection of a coordinated attack on multiple critical infrastructure targets." General Williams focused her attention directly on Maya. "Staff Sergeant, I've reviewed the preliminary reports. Before you begin your formal briefing, I have a direct question. How did you identify the attack pattern so early? My best people estimate the hostile actors were at least 3 hours from execution phase when you initiated countermeasures." Maya straightened, meeting the general's gaze directly. "Permission to speak freely, ma'am?" "Granted. Your analysts are approaching the problem from a reactive framework, General. They're looking for known signatures, established patterns, and recognized methodologies. Oracle Protocol operates from a fundamentally different assumption that the most dangerous attacks will deliberately avoid all known signatures." The room was silent as Maya continued. "My grandmother developed the protocol based on her experience tracking human intelligence networks. She realized that digital attackers think like human operatives. They have habits, preferences, and unconscious patterns they don't even recognize in themselves. Oracle Protocol isn't looking for the attack itself. It's looking for the human fingerprints beneath the code." General Williams leaned forward slightly, her interest visibly piqued. "Continue." For the next 30 minutes, Maya walked through the fundamentals of Oracle Protocol, explaining how it combined traditional signals intelligence with behavioral psychology and predictive modeling to identify threats before they fully materialized. She demonstrated how yesterday's attack had been detected through subtle timing patterns in seemingly innocuous network traffic, patterns that revealed the presence of human operators coordinating their activities across multiple systems. "The key insight," Maya explained, highlighting a section of code on the main display, "is that even the most sophisticated attackers can't eliminate all traces of human decision-making from their operations. They try to randomize their activities, but true randomness is actually incredibly difficult for humans to achieve. We leave patterns everywhere, especially when working under pressure." Colonel Jefferson, one of the Pentagon representatives, interrupted. "This is fascinating from a theoretical perspective, Staff Sergeant, but I'm having difficulty understanding how you operationalize these insights. The pattern recognition you're describing would require processing power beyond what's available in standard intelligence centers." "That's because Oracle Protocol doesn't rely solely on computational power, sir," Maya replied. "It combines automated pattern detection with human intuition. The system flags potential anomalies, but the final analysis requires an operator who understands both the technical and psychological dimensions of the threat." "You're saying this protocol can't be fully automated?" The NSA representative sounded skeptical. "That creates a significant bottleneck in implementation." "With respect, ma'am, that's a feature, not a bug," Maya countered. "Fully automated systems are predictable, and predictability is vulnerability in intelligence work. The human element introduces adaptability that purely algorithmic approaches can't match." The elderly man at the end of the table spoke for the first time, his voice surprisingly strong despite his age. "She's right. We've been over-relying on automated systems for too long. It's making us vulnerable." All eyes turned to him, and Maya noticed the subtle shift in the room's dynamics. Whoever this man was, his opinion carried extraordinary weight. General Williams nodded thoughtfully. "James, I was hoping you'd weigh in on this. You worked with Captain Reynolds directly, didn't you?" The elderly man, James, nodded slowly. "Eleanor and I ran operations together for the better part of 2 decades. She was developing these concepts long before we had the technology to fully implement them." His gaze shifted to Maya. "The question is whether her granddaughter truly understands the implications of what she's inherited." Maya felt the weight of the moment pressing down on her. This wasn't just about explaining a technical protocol. It was about proving she was worthy of her grandmother's legacy. "Sir," she began carefully, "Oracle Protocol isn't just a methodology for detecting threats. It's a philosophy about intelligence work, about seeing beyond the obvious, about understanding that our adversaries are human beings with human limitations, and about having the courage to act on incomplete information when patterns suggest a clear direction." She paused, gathering her thoughts. My grandmother taught me that the most dangerous enemies aren't the ones with the most sophisticated weapons or the most advanced technology. They're the ones who understand how we think, how we analyze, and how to use our own procedures against us. James studied her for a long moment, then a slow smile spread across his weathered face. "Well said, Staff Sergeant." Eleanor couldn't have put it better herself. He turned to General Williams. "Abigail, this is exactly what we've been looking for. The human element that our cyber operations have been missing. I recommend immediate implementation of Oracle Protocol, with Staff Sergeant Reynolds leading the training program." General Williams considered this recommendation, her expression thoughtful. "The implications are significant. This would represent a fundamental shift in our approach to cyber intelligence. We'd need to select the right personnel, establish new training protocols, potentially reorganize entire divisions." "With respect, General," Maya interjected, "we don't have the luxury of time. The attack we intercepted yesterday wasn't an isolated incident. It was a test, a probing action to assess our defensive capabilities. The real attack is still coming." Her statement landed like a stone in still water, sending ripples of tension through the room. "You have evidence of this?" Colonel Jefferson asked sharply. "Not evidence in the traditional sense, sir. But the pattern is clear. The attack was too well organized, too precisely structured to be a standalone operation. It bears all the hallmarks of what my grandmother called a, quote, calibration run. A preliminary action designed to measure response times, defensive methodologies, and operational procedures." James nodded slowly. "She's right. I've seen this pattern before. If yesterday was the probe, the main attack will be coming within days, not weeks." General Williams made her decision. "Colonel Mercer, effective immediately, you're to establish a new operational division at Holloway dedicated to implementing Oracle Protocol. Staff Sergeant Reynolds will lead the technical aspects of the operation, reporting directly to you. Select your personnel carefully. We need analysts who can think beyond their training." "Yes, General." "Staff Sergeant Reynolds," Williams continued, "I'm granting you provisional authority to operate across normal command structures as needed to implement this protocol. Colonel Mercer will handle the administrative aspects, but the operational decisions are yours." The responsibility was enormous, far beyond what someone of her rank would normally be entrusted with. Maya felt the weight of it settling on her shoulders, but also a sense of rightness. This was what her grandmother had prepared her for. "I understand, General. Thank you for your trust." "Don't thank me yet," Williams replied with a grim smile. "If your assessment is correct, you're about to face the challenge of your career. I expect to be kept fully informed of all developments." The briefing concluded shortly thereafter, with the various officials departing to set the new plan in motion. Only James remained behind, watching as Maya gathered her materials. "You look like her," he said finally. "Not just physically. The way you think, the way you present information. It's Eleanor all over again." Maya paused, studying the elderly man more carefully. "You knew her well." It wasn't a question, but James answered anyway. "As well as anyone could. We were partners for many years in more ways than one." Understanding dawned. "You're James Blackwood," Maya said softly. "She told me about you. The only man who ever kept up with me, she called you." James laughed, a sound of genuine warmth. "That was Eleanor, always generous in her assessments. Truth is, I spent most of our career together struggling to keep pace with her mind." His expression grew more serious. "She never told me she was training you in our methods." "It wasn't formal training, not at first," Maya explained. "She would pose puzzles, scenarios, pattern recognition games when I was a child. Later, when she was sick, she became more deliberate about passing on her knowledge." James nodded thoughtfully. "She always played the long game. Even at the end, she was thinking 3 moves ahead of everyone else." He stood slowly, his movements careful but not frail. "The protocol will work, but only if you trust your instincts the way she did. The data will only take you so far." "I understand." "I hope so," James said, moving toward the door. Because based on what I saw yesterday, you're facing something even Eleanor never encountered. A cyber adversary with both technical sophistication and psychological insight. They'll adapt to standard countermeasures. Only Oracle Protocol has a chance of staying ahead of them. As he reached the door, he turned back. One more thing. Eleanor never told you everything. There are aspects of the protocol she kept only in her head, fail-safes and contingencies for worst-case scenarios. If you find yourself backed into a corner, remember that she always built in an escape route. Always. With that cryptic advice, he departed, leaving Maya alone with the enormity of the task ahead. The next 12 hours were a blur of activity. Colonel Mercer moved with impressive efficiency, securing a dedicated operations center for the new Oracle division and beginning the process of selecting personnel. Maya worked alongside him, reviewing the files of potential team members, looking not just for technical qualifications but for the kind of adaptive thinking and intuitive reasoning that the protocol required. By nightfall, they had assembled a core team of 7 analysts, a deliberately small group chosen for quality rather than quantity. Among them were Airman First Class Harrison and Staff Sergeant Donovan, both of whom had demonstrated unexpected aptitude for pattern recognition during yesterday's operation. "Are you sure about including them?" Colonel Mercer asked privately as they finalized the team roster. "Given your history at the security checkpoint?" "That's precisely why I want them, sir," Maya explained. "They've already had their assumptions challenged. They've seen firsthand what happens when you look past preconceptions and focus on capabilities. That makes them more open to the unconventional thinking Oracle Protocol requires." The colonel nodded, accepting her reasoning. "Your grandmother had a similar philosophy. She often recruited from among those who had initially underestimated her. She said it created more loyal team members in the long run." She was right about that, like she was right about most things. At 2,100 hours, Maya called the newly formed team together for their first briefing. The operations center was still being configured, equipment being installed and secure communications being established, but time was of the essence. "I'll be direct," she began, looking at each team member in turn. "Based on pattern analysis of yesterday's intercepted attack, we believe a larger, more sophisticated cyber offensive is imminent. We have days at most to prepare, and what we're preparing for is unlike anything in your training manuals." She pulled up the visualization of the attack pattern they had detected the previous day. This wasn't just a cyber attack. It was reconnaissance, an adversary testing our defenses, measuring our response times, and identifying our methodologies. The real attack will be designed to bypass every standard countermeasure in our arsenal. Staff Sergeant Donovan raised his hand. "With respect, Sergeant Reynolds, how can we defend against something specifically designed to bypass our defenses?" "That's where Oracle Protocol comes in," Maya replied. "Standard cyber defense is reactive. It identifies known threats and responds according to established procedures. Oracle Protocol is predictive. It anticipates the adversary's next move by understanding the human decision-making behind the code." She walked them through the basics of the methodology, explaining how it combined technical analysis with psychological profiling to identify the human fingerprints in digital operations. "The protocol operates on 3 core principles," she explained, bringing up a new diagram on the main display. "First, pattern recognition beyond statistical norms, identifying the subtle regularities that human operators can't eliminate from their actions. Second, behavioral prediction, using those patterns to anticipate future actions. And third, preemptive countermeasures, setting traps based on those predictions." For the next 2 hours, she drilled the team on the fundamentals, pushing them to think beyond their training, to see connections that weren't obvious, to trust their intuition while grounding it in solid analysis. By midnight, they were exhausted but engaged, their minds stretching to accommodate this new approach to intelligence work. Maya could see the spark of understanding beginning to take hold, particularly in Harrison and Donovan, who approached the challenge with an intensity that surprised her. "Get some rest," she told them finally. "We reconvene at 0700. The real work begins tomorrow." As the team dispersed, Colonel Mercer approached her workstation. "Impressive first session. You have a natural talent for teaching complex concepts." "Thank you, sir, but we're still just scratching the surface of what Oracle Protocol can do." The colonel nodded, his expression thoughtful. "General Williams called while you were briefing the team. NSA has detected increased activity in the same network clusters you identified yesterday. Your prediction about a larger attack appears to be correct. Maya felt a chill run down her spine despite the warmth of the operations center. How soon? Their analysts estimate 72 hours at most. But given how your grandmother's protocol detected yesterday's attack hours before conventional methods, I'm inclined to trust your timeline more than theirs. We'll be ready, sir. She hoped she sounded more confident than she felt. I know you will, Reynolds. He paused, studying her face. There's something else you should know. James Blackwood has requested to observe your operation. He's been granted full access. This was unexpected. James Blackwood was a legend in intelligence circles, his actual role and authority shrouded in the kind of secrecy that generated whispered conversations among junior personnel. That he would take a personal interest in their operation suggested stakes even higher than she had realized. Does he expect to take command? She asked carefully. Colonel Mercer shook his head. Just the opposite. He was quite clear that you're to maintain operational control. He simply wants to observe. This was both reassuring and unsettling. James had known her grandmother intimately, had worked with her for decades. His presence would be a constant reminder of the legacy she was trying to uphold. Understood, sir. If that's all, I should get some rest as well. Tomorrow will be challenging. The colonel nodded and turned to leave, then paused. One more thing, Reynolds. The Security Council has been briefed on the situation. The President is being kept informed of developments. The implications were clear. This wasn't just an Air Force operation anymore. It had national security implications at the highest levels. No pressure, Maya murmured to herself as the colonel departed. Alone in the operations center, she returned to her analysis of yesterday's attack, searching for any details she might have missed, any patterns that could provide additional insight into what they were facing. Her grandmother had always emphasized the importance of continuous reassessment, of looking at the same data from different angles to reveal hidden connections. As she worked, she became aware of a presence behind her. Turning, she found James Blackwood standing in the doorway, watching her with that same intense gaze. You should be resting, he said, his voice gentle despite the implicit criticism. So should you, she countered. It's past midnight. He smiled, acknowledging the point. Sleep has never come easily to those of us in this line of work. Too many patterns swimming behind our eyelids. He moved into the room, taking a seat beside her workstation. You're looking for something specific, he observed. Something that's bothering you about yesterday's attack. Maya nodded, impressed by his perception. The timing was too perfect. Not just the attack itself, but the way it was detected. If Technical Sergeant Walsh hadn't recognized my tattoo, if I hadn't been assigned to the analysis team yesterday morning, the attack might have succeeded. James considered this, his expression grave. You think it wasn't a coincidence? I think someone wanted me to see it. Wanted me to implement Oracle Protocol. Why would an adversary want to reveal their hand to the one person most capable of stopping them? Maya's eyes returned to the complex data visualization on her screen. Because they're not trying to succeed in the conventional sense. They're testing something or someone. Understanding dawned in James's eyes. They're testing you. Or more precisely, they're testing Oracle Protocol itself. It's the only explanation that fits all the facts. The attack was sophisticated enough to bypass standard security, but contained just enough pattern markers to trigger Oracle Protocol's detection methods. It's like they designed it to be caught, but only by someone using my grandmother's methodology. The implications were disturbing. If she was right, they weren't facing a conventional cyber adversary with traditional objectives. They were facing someone who understood Oracle Protocol, who might even have anticipated its implementation. The question, James said slowly, is who would know enough about Eleanor's methods to design an attack specifically to test them? Maya met his gaze directly. You tell me, who besides my grandmother had full knowledge of Oracle Protocol? Who else could have adapted it for offensive rather than defensive purposes? The question hung in the air between them, charged with suspicion and the weight of history. James sighed deeply, suddenly looking every one of his 70-plus years. Eleanor and I weren't the only ones who worked on early versions of what became Oracle Protocol. There was a third member of our team, briefly. Brilliant mind, incredible intuition for pattern recognition, but unstable, ethically flexible. What happened to them? He was removed from the program after proposing we use the methodology offensively rather than defensively. Eleanor and I saw Oracle as a shield. He saw it as a sword. James's expression darkened with the memory. We lost track of him after he left government service. There were rumors he went private sector, then rumors he went overseas. Eventually, the rumors stopped. And you think he might be behind this? James shook his head slowly. Victor would be in his 70s now, like me. This feels like something else. Maybe a protege, someone he trained in his version of the protocol. He fixed Maya with a penetrating gaze. The question is, what do they want? If they're deliberately engaging with Oracle Protocol, they have an objective beyond standard cyber warfare. Maya turned back to her screens, the pieces beginning to fall into place in her mind. They want to draw us out, to force us to implement the full protocol, revealing our capabilities and methodologies. It's intelligence gathering disguised as an attack. Which means the real danger isn't the attack itself, James concluded. It's how we respond to it. The realization settled over them both. They were being manipulated into revealing secrets that had been carefully guarded for decades. The adversary wasn't just attacking networks. They were attacking Oracle Protocol itself, probing for weaknesses, studying its implementation. We need to change our approach, Maya said, her mind already racing ahead to potential solutions. If they're expecting Oracle Protocol in its standard form, we need to adapt, to implement variations my grandmother never documented. James smiled, a glint of pride in his eyes. Now you're thinking like Eleanor. She always said the protocol itself wasn't the secret. It was the ability to adapt it on the fly, to create new patterns faster than the adversary could analyze them. As the first hints of dawn began to lighten the sky outside, Maya felt a renewed sense of purpose. Her grandmother had prepared her for this moment, had trained her to think beyond conventional boundaries, to see patterns where others saw only chaos. Tomorrow, she would lead her team not just in implementing Oracle Protocol, but in evolving it, creating a new approach that even those familiar with the original methodology couldn't anticipate. The adversary thought they were testing Oracle Protocol, measuring its capabilities and limitations. Instead, they were about to encounter something new, a version of the protocol shaped by a new generation, adapted for threats its creators had never imagined. Eleanor Reynolds' legacy wasn't just the methodology she had developed, it was the mindset she had instilled in her granddaughter. The courage to look beyond established patterns, to trust her instincts, and to forge new paths when the old ones no longer served. As James departed to get what rest he could before the operation resumed in earnest, Maya returned to her analysis with renewed focus. The patterns were there, waiting to be discovered. The human fingerprints beneath the code, the subtle markers of intent and methodology that would reveal not just what the adversary was planning, but who they were. The operations center hummed with a different energy at 0700 the next morning. Where military intelligence facilities typically operated with rigid precision, Maya had reconfigured the space to encourage the kind of collaborative thinking Oracle Protocol demanded. Workstations were arranged in a circular pattern rather than the standard grid, allowing analysts to maintain visual contact with each other while working. Walls were covered with data visualizations, pattern maps, and behavioral analyses that looked more like the work of profilers than cyber specialists. Colonel Mercer surveyed the transformed space with a mixture of surprise and approval as he entered for the morning briefing. "You've been busy, Staff Sergeant." "The environment shapes the thinking, sir," Maya replied. Oracle Protocol works best when analysts can make intuitive connections across different data streams. The standard layout creates psychological barriers to that kind of lateral thinking. Her team filed in, looking more rested than she felt. Maya had managed only 3 hours of sleep, her mind too active with the implications of last night's realization to truly rest. James Blackwood arrived last, taking a position at the back of the room where he could observe without interfering. "Yesterday, I introduced you to the basics of Oracle Protocol," Maya began without preamble. "Today, we're going to implement something new, a variation I'm calling Adaptive Oracle. She brought up a complex visualization on the main display, showing interconnected nodes representing different aspects of the methodology. The original protocol assumes a learning curve that we get better at predicting the adversary's actions as we gather more data on their patterns. But what if the adversary is already familiar with our methodology? What if they're designing their activities specifically to manipulate our analysis? Staff Sergeant Donovan leaned forward, his expression intent. You're saying they know about Oracle protocol? How is that possible? I'd never heard of it before yesterday. That's the question we need to answer, Maya acknowledged. But for now, we need to operate under the assumption that our adversary has at least partial knowledge of our methods. That means we need to adapt faster than they can anticipate. She outlined her modified approach. Instead of applying the standard pattern recognition algorithms, they would rotate through variations, changing their analytical framework at irregular intervals to prevent the adversary from identifying and exploiting their methodology. In practical terms, she explained, each of you will approach the same datasets using different pattern recognition frameworks. Where traditional intelligence would see this as redundant, we're deliberately creating multiple analytical perspectives to identify patterns the adversary might be trying to conceal. For the next hour, she assigned specific roles and frameworks to each team member, deliberately pairing analysts with complementary thinking styles. Harrison, with his background in statistical analysis, was partnered with Technical Sergeant Rivera, who had an intuitive approach to pattern recognition. Donovan, whose strength was in communication systems, was paired with Captain Chen, whose expertise was in behavioral prediction. Our objective isn't just to detect the next attack, Maya emphasized as she concluded the briefing. It's to identify who's behind it. Every line of code, every timing pattern, every target selection reveals something about the human operators directing this activity. We're not just analyzing data, we're building a psychological profile of our adversary. As the team dispersed to their assigned stations, Colonel Mercer approached Maya. Innovative approach, Reynolds. But I'm concerned about the timeline. NSA is now estimating less than 48 hours before the next attack, based on observed preparations in the identified networks. We'll be ready, sir. She hoped she sounded more confident than she felt. The modified protocol was untested, a theoretical approach based on her understanding of her grandmother's methodology, combined with her own insights. General Williams will be expecting a progress report by 1,600 hours, the colonel added. The Security Council is meeting tomorrow morning to discuss response options if we can't prevent the attack. The pressure was mounting, not just from their unseen adversary, but from the highest levels of government. Maya felt the weight of it pressing down on her shoulders, threatening to overwhelm her. But beneath that weight was something stronger, a determination that had been instilled in her since childhood. A belief that patterns revealed truth if you knew how to see them. We'll have something substantive by then, sir, she promised. If not the complete picture, at least enough to narrow down who we're dealing with and what they're targeting. As the colonel departed, James approached her workstation. Adaptive Oracle, he said thoughtfully. Eleanor would approve. She always said the protocol should evolve with each implementation. I'm counting on that, Maya replied. Because if I'm right about who we're facing, they've had years to study the original methodology. Our only advantage is the ability to adapt faster than they can analyze. James nodded, his expression grave. I've been thinking about what you said last night, about being deliberately drawn into this. There's something else you should consider. If someone with knowledge of Oracle protocol is behind this, they might not just be testing our defensive capabilities. What do you mean? They might be looking for something specific. Something Eleanor hid within the protocol itself. Maya frowned. Hidden how? The methodology is complex, but logical. There's no place to hide anything within its structure. Not within the structure, James corrected. Within the patterns it's designed to detect. Eleanor was cautious. She built safeguards into everything she created. Escape routes only she could see. It's possible she embedded something in Oracle protocol that even I don't know about. The implication was both disturbing and intriguing. If her grandmother had hidden something within the protocol itself, something valuable enough that someone would orchestrate an elaborate cyber attack to discover it, what could it be? And more importantly, could Maya find it before their adversary did? Before she could pursue this line of thought further, an alert sounded from Donovan's workstation. Sergeant Reynolds, I'm detecting unusual traffic patterns in subnet 4 alpha. It doesn't match any of our predicted attack vectors, but there's something off about the timing. Maya moved to his station, studying the data flowing across his screen. The traffic looked innocuous at first glance. Standard encrypted communications, nothing that would trigger conventional security alerts. But as she watched the pattern develop, she saw what had caught Donovan's attention. The packet timing had a subtle irregularity, a micro-hesitation every 17 seconds that was barely perceptible unless you were specifically looking for timing anomalies. "Good catch, Sergeant," she said, genuinely impressed. "This is exactly the kind of subtle pattern Oracle Protocol is designed to detect. Run a correlation analysis against all similar traffic patterns over the past 72 hours. While Donovan executed her request, Maya circulated through the operations center, checking in with each analyst, guiding their focus without dictating their approach. She was careful to encourage the intuitive leaps that traditional intelligence training often suppressed, the connections that couldn't be justified by standard analytical procedures but often led to breakthrough insights. By midday, a pattern was emerging, not of an imminent attack, but of a methodical, patient reconnaissance operation that had been ongoing for months. The subtle timing anomalies Donovan had detected weren't new. They were signatures that had been present in seemingly unrelated network traffic dating back nearly a year, invisible to conventional security systems but unmistakable once you knew what to look for. "They've been inside our perimeter for months," Captain Chen concluded, bringing together data from 3 different analytical frameworks. "Not actively attacking, just watching, learning, building a comprehensive map of our systems and responses. It's like they've been building a digital twin of our entire defense infrastructure," Harrison added. "A perfect simulation they can use to test attacks before launching them against the real target." Maya felt a chill run down her spine as the implications became clear. This wasn't preparation for a conventional cyber attack. It was something far more sophisticated. The creation of a shadow version of their systems that could be used to predict exactly how they would respond to any given threat. "If they have a simulated version of our defenses, they can run unlimited attack scenarios until they find one we can't counter," she said, thinking aloud. "They're not just planning an attack. They're perfecting it through simulation." The team fell silent as the magnitude of what they were facing sank in. This wasn't just sophisticated, it was unprecedented. A level of preparation and strategic thinking that went beyond normal state-sponsored cyber operations. "We need to find the source," Maya decided. "Not just the technical origin of the traffic, but the human intelligence behind it. Someone is directing this operation, making decisions about what to target, how to proceed, and they're leaving fingerprints in those decisions." She returned to her own workstation, pulling up the behavioral analysis framework her grandmother had developed, a tool for identifying decision-making patterns in seemingly random activities. As she fed in the data they had collected, focusing not on the technical aspects, but on the timing, the target selection, the methodological approaches, a profile began to emerge. "Whoever is behind this has military training," she observed. "The operation has disciplined timing windows, clear command hierarchies in the code structures, and contingency planning that suggests battlefield experience. But there's something else." She frowned, noticing an anomaly in the pattern. "There's a signature here that doesn't fit the military profile. A creative element, almost artistic in its approach to problem-solving." James had been silently observing their work, but at this, he moved closer to Maya's station. "Eleanor used to say you could identify an intelligence operative by the way they balance structure and creativity," he said quietly. "The best ones maintained military discipline, but weren't constrained by conventional thinking." "Like Victor," Maya said, making the connection. "Your former colleague who wanted to use Oracle Protocol offensively." James nodded slowly. "Victor Kane was a brilliant analyst with a military background, but he approached intelligence work like an art form. He saw patterns no one else could see, connections that seemed impossible until he explained them." Maya focused on the anomalous pattern elements, isolating them from the surrounding data. If this is Victor or someone he trained, they're leaving a signature, a calling card embedded in their methodology. She extracted the pattern and ran it through a different analytical framework, one designed to identify stylistic elements rather than operational characteristics. The result was a distinctive signature, a unique approach to timing and sequencing that was as individual as a fingerprint. "This is it," she said with growing excitement. "This is our adversary's signature. Now we need to find other instances of it, build a historical profile of their activities." For the next 2 hours, the team scoured historical data, looking for the distinctive pattern they had identified. They found it in a series of seemingly unrelated cyber incidents dating back 3 years, subtle intrusions into various systems, never causing damage, but always extracting specific types of information about security protocols and response mechanisms. "It's like they've been building a comprehensive map of global cyber defenses," Captain Chen observed. "Not just ours, but across multiple countries and organizations." "But why?" Harrison asked. "What's the endgame?" "If they wanted to cause damage, they've had countless opportunities." Maya was beginning to see the bigger picture, the pattern behind the pattern. They're not interested in conventional objectives like data theft or service disruption. They're mapping defensive methodologies themselves, studying how different organizations detect and respond to threats. She turned to James, who had been watching their analysis with growing concern. "They're collecting intelligence on intelligence methods, building a catalog of detection and response protocols from around the world." James nodded grimly. "Which means they're planning something that would trigger all those protocols simultaneously. Something big enough that understanding every possible response becomes critical to success." The implications were staggering. Whatever this adversary was planning, it was orders of magnitude beyond normal cyber operations. It wasn't targeted at a single nation or organization, but at the global intelligence community as a whole. "We need to take this to Colonel Mercer immediately," Maya decided. "This goes beyond our original mandate." Before she could contact the colonel, however, a new alert sounded. This one from multiple workstations simultaneously. The pattern they had been tracking was suddenly active again, but with a difference. The subtle reconnaissance had transformed into something more direct, more urgent. "They're initiating contact," Maya realized, studying the new data patterns. "Not an attack, but a deliberate signal meant for us specifically." "How can you be sure?" Donovan asked, skeptical. "Because they're using a modified version of Oracle Protocol's own pattern structure," she explained. "It's like they're speaking our language, using our own methodology to communicate." The signal was coming through on a specific frequency, using a transmission method that mimicked Oracle Protocol's pattern recognition system in reverse, creating patterns that only someone using the protocol would recognize as deliberate rather than random. "Can we respond?" Maya asked, looking at her team. "Can we use the same method to establish two-way communication?" Captain Chen nodded slowly. "Theoretically, yes. We could mirror their transmission method, create patterns they would recognize as deliberate responses." "Do it," Maya ordered. "Let's find out what they want." As Chen worked to establish the communication channel, Maya consulted with James. "This changes everything. They're not just testing us. They're trying to talk to us. Why?" James looked troubled. "There's only one reason someone with Victor's background would initiate direct contact after such elaborate preparation. He's ready to negotiate." "Negotiate what?" "Whatever he's really been after all this time. The cyber operations, the intelligence gathering, those were just means to an end. This communication is his true objective." Before Maya could respond, Chen called out from his workstation. "Channel established. We're receiving a message." The main display filled with a stream of data that looked like random noise to untrained eyes, but contained a clear message when interpreted through Oracle Protocol's pattern recognition framework. "To the inheritor of Oracle, you have passed the preliminary tests. You are indeed Eleanor Reynolds' granddaughter. We have much to discuss regarding what she left behind. Arrange secure communication through channel Delta 7 using the protocol's original parameters. You have 24 hours to comply." The message was followed by a digital signature, a complex pattern that matched the one they had identified as their adversary's unique fingerprint. "It's him," James confirmed, his face pale. "That's Victor's signature, after all these years." Maya stared at the message, its implications rippling through her mind. What does he mean? What she left behind? What could my grandmother have that would be worth all this? James looked away, a shadow crossing his face. Eleanor was involved in more than just defensive intelligence work. Toward the end of her career, she had access to information that governments would kill to control: zero-day exploits, backdoors into critical systems, intelligence on deep-cover operations around the world. You think she took that information when she left? Hid it somewhere? Maya couldn't believe her grandmother would compromise national security that way. Not took, James corrected. Secured. Eleanor never trusted bureaucracies to handle sensitive information properly. She believed certain things were too dangerous to leave in systems that could be compromised. And Victor thinks I know where this information is hidden. He thinks you inherited more than just her methodology. He thinks you have the key to whatever safeguards she put in place. Maya felt a surge of determination mixed with indignation. Victor Kane had orchestrated an elaborate operation spanning years, potentially threatened national security, all based on the assumption that she had access to information she'd never known existed. We need to inform Colonel Mercer and General Williams immediately, she decided. This is far beyond our operational parameters. James placed a hand on her arm, his expression grave. Before you do that, you need to consider something. If Victor was right, if Eleanor did secure critical intelligence somewhere outside normal channels, bringing in the full weight of military command might not be the best approach. Bureaucracies have their own agendas, their own priorities. What are you suggesting, that we respond to him without authorization? I'm suggesting that you consider what Eleanor would want. She trained you for a reason, Maya. She prepared you to think independently, to see patterns others couldn't see. There might be a middle path here, one that protects both national security and whatever legacy your grandmother was trying to preserve. Maya studied the elderly man's face, seeing the conflict there. The loyalty to his former colleague warring with his duty to the intelligence community he had served for decades. You know what this is about, don't you? She asked quietly. You know what my grandmother hid. James sighed heavily. I have suspicions. In her final years, Eleanor was working on something she called the failsafe, a comprehensive accountability system for the intelligence community itself. A way to ensure that no operation, no matter how classified, could completely disappear from the record. A watchdog for the watchdogs, Maya murmured, understanding dawning. A system to prevent intelligence agencies from operating without any oversight. Exactly. She believed deeply in the mission of intelligence work, but was concerned about the lack of accountability at the highest levels. The failsafe was her solution. A secure repository of information that could be accessed only under specific circumstances by individuals with no institutional loyalties. Maya looked back at the message on the screen, seeing it in a new light. And Victor wants access to this repository. Why? To expose operations? To blackmail governments? Victor was always ideologically complex, James said carefully. He believed in radical transparency long before it became a movement. But he's also practical enough to understand the chaos that would result from dumping intelligence secrets indiscriminately. The weight of the decision pressed down on Maya. Her grandmother had prepared her for intelligence work, had trained her to think independently, to see patterns others missed. But had she also been preparing her for this specific moment? This choice between institutional loyalty and a larger principle? I need time to think, she said finally. And I need to understand more about what this failsafe actually contains before I decide how to proceed. James nodded, respecting her caution. There may be clues in Oracle protocol itself. Eleanor never created anything without building in layers of meaning. The methodology isn't just a tool for pattern recognition. It might also be a key to understanding her larger purpose. As Maya turned this possibility over in her mind, Colonel Mercer entered the operations center, his expression indicating he expected a progress report. Staff Sergeant Reynolds, General Williams is waiting for our update. What do we have? Maya made a split-second decision. Sir, we've identified the source of the anomalous traffic. It appears to be a sophisticated reconnaissance operation conducted by a former intelligence operative named Victor Kane. We believe he's mapping global cyber defense systems for an unknown purpose. She deliberately omitted the direct communication they had just received, buying herself time to consider the implications before bringing the full military command structure into the situation. Kane? The colonel frowned. The name sounds familiar. He worked with my grandmother briefly in the early days of what became Oracle Protocol, Maya explained. He left government service under contested circumstances. We're still analyzing his potential objectives and capabilities. It wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the complete truth either. Maya felt a twinge of guilt at the omission, but something in her gut told her that rushing this information up the chain of command might close doors that needed to remain open, at least until she understood exactly what her grandmother had been protecting. I need something concrete for General Williams, Colonel Mercer pressed. Threat assessments, potential targets, recommended countermeasures. We'll have a preliminary report ready within the hour, sir, Maya promised. My team is finalizing the analysis now. As the colonel departed, satisfied for the moment, Maya caught James watching her with an expression that mingled concern with approval. Eleanor made the same choice once, he said quietly. Held back information until she understood all the implications. It was the right call then. I hope it is now. Maya returned to her workstation, mind racing with the implications of what she had learned. Her grandmother hadn't just passed down a methodology, she had entrusted her with a legacy that went far beyond pattern recognition algorithms. Oracle Protocol might be more than a tool for detecting threats. It might be the key to a system designed to hold the intelligence community itself accountable. The compass rose tattoo on her chest seemed to warm against her skin, as if acknowledging this new understanding of its significance. It wasn't just a symbol of her grandmother's legacy. It was a marker identifying her as the inheritor of a responsibility she was only beginning to comprehend. As her team continued their analysis, unaware of the larger stakes now in play, Maya made a decision. She would respond to Victor Kane through the channel he had specified, but on her own terms. She would discover what her grandmother had hidden, and why it was important enough to warrant such elaborate measures to find it. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with ethical and practical challenges that went far beyond her training or experience. But one thing was clear. Eleanor Reynolds had prepared her for this moment, had given her the tools to see patterns others couldn't see, to make connections others wouldn't make. Whatever came next, Maya would face it with the same courage and clarity that had made her grandmother a legend, not just following established protocols, but having the wisdom to know when new approaches were needed, when the standard playbook no longer applied to the challenges at hand. The digital message from Victor Kane remained on her screen, a challenge and an opportunity wrapped in layers of complexity. Maya studied it one more time, then began composing her response, not just as an Air Force intelligence specialist following orders, but as Eleanor Reynolds' granddaughter, the inheritor of a legacy more complex and far-reaching than anyone had realized. Whatever her grandmother had hidden, whatever the failsafe contained, Maya was determined to ensure it served its intended purpose, not as a weapon or a bargaining chip, but as a safeguard against the very institutions it was designed to hold accountable. The true legacy of Oracle wasn't just the methodology itself, but the courage to use it for its intended purpose, to find truth in patterns, to bring light to shadows, and to ensure that power, no matter how hidden, remained answerable to principle. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.